Language is the first thing that differentiates all the cultures. This is the first thing that I think about when I think of difference between Japanese and Polish people. The first thing that comes to mind is the language. They speak the different language. And I do believe it's an essential ingredient for forming a nation's identity because language is literature. And literature is, again, one of the most important components of your identity. Language and the literature in a specific language is the way of communication. A writing piece is a mix of everything that writer has ever seen, tasted, felt, heard. It's a mix of all the experience they've had in their entire life. It's a mix of things that surrounded them from the moment they were born to the point where this piece was written. And literature is something where you can put your thought out, and hopefully this thought will outlive you and generations after you. It is something infinite, something that helps people to communicate not only among each other but also through generations. It's insanely important to have your literature. And the problem with writing your literature in other language, for example, when you have an let's say a Ukrainian author who writes in Russian, what Russians would say, oh, he's Russian, and they would claim him. When you have an Irish author writing in English, the English would come and say, well, he's writing in English, he's English. And even though you could have 101 argument why you do not think it's true, why maybe it isn't true, right? You are at a disadvantage because the second you give up your language, you associated yourself with the colonizer's culture. And at that point, it's very hard to get that back. Historically, colonizers have all the resources and instruments to influence the narrative. Let's picture it. The colonizer has the money, has the people, has the resources. They are having a head start in this race. So when later on, when you finally recovered from the genocide your nation went through, when you are finally ready to go and share your culture, when you want to change the narrative, you find yourself being behind. You didn't even know the race has started, but you are behind because the colonizer, in this case the Russians, got the head start. They are already ahead. They have already convinced the world of how great their literature is, how great they are. They swept under the rug all of the awful things they've put people through, all of the suffering they induced on different cultures, and how they meticulously tried to destroy every ounce of freedom and national identity within their empires, being Russian Empire or USSR, doesn't really matter. But at that point, what you need to do, what you have to do, is not only to share it and show it to people and be like, look at what we've done. At this point, you have to convince them that all the things they've been hearing for years, decades, and centuries before is not true. It's not true, or it's partially true, or it's just a blatant lie. You have to go and cancel out stuff that was said before you, not just said. This stuff was put in people's heads and now they have it as their core memory, and you gotta go there and you gotta correct that memory. But let's remember, even after you broke off of that awful machine, you are at disadvantage. You do not have that much resources. And the most important resource that the colonizer had was time. Something that you now can get back. You cannot cancel it out. Now you have to work twice as hard to go out there and show the real face to the world. But the world doesn't want to hear you. They already have their truth. People do not like being corrected all the time, especially when they have this fundamental belief of something. They are not ready. They don't want you to go there and be like, well, what you think is not true. And it's so exhausting out there. So my main message that I want to just shoot out there is, especially to all of my friends from post-Soviet countries, preserve your culture. And do not identify with Russian culture. I want to touch a bit on the Russophobia topic here. I think people kind of do not understand this term fully. This term has a couple of meanings, but one of them is not afraid of Russians. We are afraid of being Russian, of waking up one day and not being able to speak any other language except for Russian. We're afraid of waking up and having our bookshelves full of fucking Dostoevsky. That is something that I'm truly scared of. I'm truly scared of the situation in which I would not be able to speak Ukrainian, where the only thing I could do is talk in Russian, read in Russian, and understand Russian. This terrifies me. And if you're someone who suffered from Russian colonialism, you should be also scared of that. That is hell on earth. This is pretty much all I had to say on this topic. If you agree, if you disagree with me, you can write it all in the comments and we could have a talk there. But I really appreciate you clicking on this video and watching it all the way through if you're still listening to me at this point. Thank you so much for being here with me, and see you in the next one.